I serve on Public Works and Transportation and Science and Technology, looking at the very basic needs of the district. It led me to, in reviewing the committees and their jurisdictions, it led me to desire Public Works and Transportation, and in combination with Science and Technology because of the focus on the conversion technology and the environment.
Mr. Speaker, I came this morning to speak about health care, but I found after listening that something is much more urgent. We've heard about the bridging of the bridges by sending money to Israel, working on peace around the world, talking about isolationism, protectionism, NAFTA, and healthcare reform. And yet, I've heard speeches about cutting off our research, ignoring that we need to continue to learn, ignoring that we need to create jobs, and that we must look out for the welfare of our children and the future of this nation. I've heard people saying, cut all the research, cut the state-of-the-art research, cut the super collider. Yes, we can cut the super collider, and yes, we'll save millions today, but what will we do for tomorrow? We will shut off break fronts in healthcare. We'll shut off opportunities to create jobs. We'll shut off this nation from the rest of the world, and while we talk about being global, we'll be isolated here on an island. All too often, low-income communities are subjected to decades of toxic and hazardous waste dumping. Even with the many advanced technologies that are available today, we don't have a very clear idea of how chronic exposure to hazardous chemicals affect residents' health, nor do we have much in the way of long-term solutions to abate these hazards. Traditional removal techniques, which usually move one hazardous piece of soil from one low-income community to another, are really unacceptable quick fixes. H.R. 1994 takes strong steps toward developing the information necessary to clean up the many dangerous health and environmental hazards which exist today. The Internet is one of the best examples of a federal research and development investment that resulted in significant public benefits. It is a growing and increasingly important communications medium for commerce as well as for education and research uses and for personal communications. This initiative, authorized by this bill, builds on past successes of federal R&D and provides support of research needed to accelerate the development of the technologies. It will make it faster, more dependable, which will result from this initiative, enable new applications in crisis management and response, distance education, environmental monitoring, healthcare delivery, and scientific research, to name a few. In a very real way, it will help shape the future, and I urge my colleagues to support and pass this bill. Sometimes I wonder, what would public education do in this nation without voices like mine speaking out? Yet, my people can't even get the equality in the distribution of the funds. It's most unfortunate that this cannot be understood. I've been involved with the Super Collider since before it became a part of Texas. Having served in the Texas Senate at the time, I was one of the people that helped to pass the Constitution Amendment and worked all over the state to get it, influenced the vote of the voters of Texas to support it. And it's clear that it could very well go into the water in that particular area and could contaminate the entire area. So if there is an area or a move or a plan to address this area, I'd like to hear about it and the cost of it. Importantly, NIST does not establish or enforce regulatory standards. The role of NIST is to ensure that these activities are based on sound science and accurate measurements. In summary, Mr. Chairman, the work being performed by NIST is in the crucial areas of healthcare and environmental technology, and it is of a critical nature and is work that NIST is uniquely qualified to perform. Because Yes, sir, I will.
Well, I just wondered, so if I'm to understand, you think that NASA should spend $45 million for travel rather than $31 million for travel, is that correct?
I think
that we need to coordinate the real basic needs for what travel it is and look at those figures rather than deciding you just want to slash something.
So just so I understand, the decision here is between $45 million for travel and $31 million for travel. Gentlelady mentioned traveling to Russia. We don't understand why you'd have to do that since we already have a full-time NASA office in Russia. But nevertheless, what she's saying is that she believes that we ought to be spending more money for travel rather than saving that money. Is that correct?
Let me say that you can make a simplistic argument like that, and it might sound like it makes sense. Yes, but it does not make sense unless you can relate it to reality, relate it to basic needs of a program. We can all play with numbers. But unless those numbers make sense in reality, you're wasting other dollars.
The gentlelady would yield. She's the one who mentioned travel to Russia. She said that that's one of the things that this money would be used for.
And exactly what it would cut. If you would tell me exactly what the dollars you're talking about will pay for, then we can relate. But I'm talking about cutting essential travel to carry out the duty of NASA.
And you don't think they can do that on $31.5 million?
I think we ought to look back in their testimony and see. I don't know that they can do it with $31 million. It might not make sense. I think that you ought to be the one explaining to me why they can make all these trips with $31 million rather than talking about and trying to excite the public. I will be supporting an amendment offered by Mr. Tanner and myself to provide authorization to the Advanced Technology Program and the Manufacturing Extension Partnership. These programs will assist American companies in bringing new technologies to the marketplace and really are critical for our economic development. Inasmuch as we're in a restructuring of our economy, all centered around technology, it seems almost unknowledgeable of that process to ignore this key area. What I need to ask is that at what point will these polluters be responsible for cleaning up? If we stand here and change the goalpost one time after another, the time never comes. The Clinton administration, which you love to refer to on this, gave leeway, but it is time now to clean the air. People are dying from this dirty air.
All right, can I?
The lives, but the important thing is that we are saving lives. And as we begin to use more of our technology in building, we'll see that even the material destruction will diminish. And it underscores why we need to continue to support science and technology to develop more skills for approaching and dealing with these type of catastrophes when they happen. As a senior member of the Science Committee, I feel the CBC alternative budget supports these initiatives to invest in our children's future, our nation's future. Federal entitlements such as NASA and the National Science Foundation need funding to inspire today's youth so we can have a future in research and competitiveness. The science budget funds our scientific and engineering workforce, supports teacher enrichment programs, and helps inspire a future generation of researchers. Our nation's future depends more and more on the quality of our innovative ideas. The fruits of these investments meet vital national needs and improve the quality of life for all Americans. I support the Norris Teacher Scholarships, and I know that the storm of need is sure, and it is now. It takes effort and investment to deal with this issue. There are now more and more high-need schools, which means we have more and more students that need special attention, and we cannot have a positive future until we include them in this education. Funding included in the CBC budget also supports great competitiveness in science and technology. As a senior member of the House Science Committee, I feel it is important to invest in our children's futures, which is also an investment in our own future. Provisions for the science and technology fields will address access to higher education, enrichment programs in the STEM fields, and your critical research, and spur critical research and development to meet the needs of this country. Our nation's future depends on more and more on the quality of our innovative ideas. The fruits of these investments meet vital national needs and improve the quality of life for all Americans.
As a registered nurse, I have seen firsthand how children are particularly sensitive to emissions of mercury and other air toxins. As a mother and a grandmother, I cannot stand by and watch these emissions go unchecked. I have always been a strong and proud defender of EPA's charge to protect public health and the environment. In 2009, I led a letter to EPA Administrator Lisa Jackson calling for even stronger emission standards to reduce mercury pollution. And last year, I was pleased to see that EPA finalized standards for cement and plant emissions that will reduce mercury and particle matter pollution by over 90%, resulting in health savings up to $18 billion each year. While progress has been made, the fact remains that women are woefully underrepresented at all levels of STEM studies and in STEM careers. We need action, and we need bold leadership. Similarly, the crucial role that energy plays in delivery of safe, sanitary water to our constituents. The Energy and Water Research Integration Act encourages research into energy technologies that would improve and minimize the use of water in energy production, and also establishes a mechanism for federal agencies to work with state and local governments and other stakeholders to advance our understanding of what is known as the energy-water nexus. We must invest more in research. We must also ensure that we are educating and training the next generation of top quantum scientists and engineers. Our nation's progress in advancing research in quantum science and capitalizing on these investments to develop real-world technologies will depend on partnerships among our federal agencies, universities, and the private sector. In the early days of the space program, women and their talents were critically important, but often overlooked. Women were typically not permitted to serve in any visible position or recognized publicly for their contributions. Women of color faced additional daily indignity of racial discrimination. In spite of these challenges, these women chose to apply their considerable talents to help achieve what was arguably one of the nation's crowning technological achievements, landing the first humans on the moon. The success of the NASA space program was due in large part to their brilliance, hard work, and perseverance in the face of adversity. What better example can we hope to give our sons and daughters? This bill will bestow Congress's highest civilian honor in recognition of the achievements of Katherine Johnson, Dr. Christine Darden, Dorothy Vaughan, and Mary Jackson, and all of the other women computers, mathematicians, and engineers at NACA and NASA during this important time in our history. Funding for research, innovation, and STEM education is an investment in our future, perhaps the single most important investment we can make. Many of our competitors understand this and are striving to surpass the United States in innovation capacity and in the creation of a highly skilled 21st century workforce. It used to be that the world's best and brightest flocked to our shores. Now many of our own best and brightest are finding better opportunities in other countries, or we are chasing them away from STEM careers altogether. From our nation's universities, because these researchers, the one with the most relevant expertise to EPA's mission of protecting public health, are denied the opportunity to provide EPA with their advice under H.R. 1422. It is difficult to understand how anyone could object to the most expert academics in the country being called on to offer their expertise to EPA. Who would know better whether EPA had mischaracterized the science on an issue than the people who are leaders in their respective fields? The board is supposed to be composed of experts, including those who may have literally written the book on the matter. What is the alternative? Should we find people to serve who are less expert? I think that the real motivation here is to prevent EPA from using these public health studies altogether. Because if EPA cannot rely upon these public health studies, then it will be much more difficult for EPA to justify its protections for public health. The effect of this is that certain public health regulations will be almost impossible to update, regardless of what new things the health sciences tell us about pollution and its effects on public health. Mr. Chair, I think it is sad that today the Science Committee is on the floor of this House of Representatives putting forth a bill that will force a public health agency to ignore science. Yeah. It would be nice when we debate bills which are supposedly about science if we actually listened to the concerns of the scientific community instead of ignoring them as the majority has done here. Likewise, some of the nation's premier public health organizations, like the American Lung Association, the American Thoracic Society, and the American Public Health Association, among others, have come out in opposition to this bill. Again, when dealing with issues of public health, it would be nice to occasionally listen to what the public health experts have to say instead of ignoring their voices like the majority has done here. Finally, a number of well-known environmental groups have registered opposition to this legislation, including the Natural Resources Defense Council, the League of Conservation Voters, and Greenpeace, among others. There was a time, not too long ago, when the views of these groups would have mattered to some of my Republican colleagues. Not too many years ago, then the Republican chairman of the Science Committee, Sherry Boland, made clear that we need to be good stewards of the environment we are leaving for future generations. I want to believe that some of my Republican colleagues still believe that. However, legislation like this bill before us today makes me fear that what we are left with is a majority party which ignores science, ignores public health, and ignores environmental damage, all for the sake of polluting industries who have endorsed the majority's actions here today. Now, I don't begrudge these companies for supporting legislation that helps their bottom line. It's expected. What concerns me is that this Congress no longer looks at the industry's requests with a critical eye. We simply rubber stamp them without any regard for our nation's scientific experts, health experts, or environmental experts and their concerns. Major research facilities play a central role in helping NSF meet its mission to promote the progress of science, cultivate the next generation of scientists and innovators. These facilities include telescopes, research ships, engineering test beds, and other cutting-edge research platforms. We recently held a hearing to congratulate the scientists working on one such endeavor, the LIGO project that detected gravity waves. As the LIGO project demonstrated, these efforts involving major facilities have the potential to generate profound breakthroughs in science and inspire a whole new generation of our best and brightest to pursue careers in STEM. And some of my colleagues like to pick certain grants and make fun of it, just as just been said, and then say it's not worth funding. One of the grants that my colleagues like to pick on is a grant entitled Ecosystem Resilience to Human Impacts, Ecological Consequences of Early Human-Set Fires in New Zealand. It may be easy for some of my colleagues to question why the federal government should spend money on studying fires that were set in a foreign country hundreds of years ago. Apparently, it is harder for them to spend 5 minutes reading the abstract. It turns out that those early settlers in New Zealand caused the loss of more than 40% of the forest in just decades. By studying the long-term effect on the ecosystem impacts of those long ago fires, We can gain knowledge to help natural resources managers make smarter decisions about how to mitigate, prepare for, and respond to massive wildfires in our own country. It is right in the public interest. Federal science agencies and OSTPs should ensure that they are accounting for the diversity among these institutions and the populations they serve. If we are to continue to prosper as a nation, we must do more to diversify our STEM workforce. Fortunately, the more than 700 MSIs that enroll nearly 30% of our nation's undergraduates know how to solve this problem. The MSI STEM Achievement Act will ensure these institutions are equipped with the resources they need to lead the way. Being chair of the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, we have already addressed a number of issues, and we will continue. We're using sound science, and we've also had the experience of many catastrophes throughout our nation that we are forced to give attention to. We passed a bulk of bills from the committee with bipartisan support, and most passed the House with overwhelming votes. And so we know that we have done the homework openly and fairly. The bill we are voting on today is critical to the future competitiveness and well-being of our nation. I look forward to its swift passage in the House, and hopefully we'll get a cooperation with the Senate, working with the Senate, and get it to the President in a short amount of time. We are today. With this legislation, we will bring about solutions for the climate crisis, enhance our semiconductor research and manufacturing, create jobs, increase regional innovation, and so much more. We will also take historic and much-needed action to build a strong and diverse STEM workforce and ensure that we're able to make use of all the brain power and talent we have in our great nation. With bipartisan STEM pieces in this bill, we will create a bright future for all of those who wish to pursue STEM, no matter their race, gender, or zip code. We are ushering in a strong future for our premier scientific agencies with transformational funding at NIST, NSF, and DOE. We also authorize important activities at NASA and address other discrete research topics across the government's scientific agencies.
Also joined by congressional leaders from around the country who fought so hard for this bill. Eddie Bernice Johnson, chair of the House Science Committee. Eddie, this whole bill wouldn't have gotten done without you. It really wouldn't have.
We chose to take giant steps. We chose to know the unknown, and we chose to lead into the future. In the years since President Kennedy's speech, we have made great strides in our endeavors in space exploration. Americans now live and work on the International Space Station. Our rovers are exploring the surface of Mars. Our telescopes are peering into the depths of the universe, and so much more.